There's a good chance that if you're in the smartphone market looking for a phone that has the ultimate flagship performance but without the ultimate flagship price, you've come across the latest Pixel 6 from Google and possibly the OnePlus 9. Compared to the more expensive models on the market, they both offer great value for money, but which should you buy? I'm Cam Bunton from Pocket-lint, and in this video I'll hopefully help you to decide. And while you're here, if you hit the like button, subscribe and tap the notification bell, that would be smashing. Comparing numbers never really tells the whole story, but if you look at the measurements of both the Pixel 6 and the OnePlus 9, you'll notice the two phones are very similar in size. The Pixel 6 does measure a tiny bit shorter, but is ever so slightly thicker and wider than the OnePlus. In truth though, there's not a lot in it. What makes a bigger difference to how they feel in hand is the materials used and the shaping of the sides. The actual frame on the OnePlus is a bit slimmer and seems to start rounding off sooner, and that makes it feel more compact. OnePlus's phone has a glossy plastic frame versus the matte finished aluminium chassis on the Pixel, and that gives Google's phone a slightly more robust but also heavier feel. It's also coated in Gorilla Glass Victus, which is Corning's most durable glass yet, and more durable than the Gorilla Glass 5 on the OnePlus 9. What's more, Google's phone has an official IP68 rating for water and dust resistance, whereas the OnePlus doesn't. Although the company has told us it should survive splashes and minor contact with water, just don't submerge it. There's also a big difference in camera design because, let's face it, the camera module on the Pixel 6 is like nothing else. It stretches across the entire back of the phone, meaning there's no wobble when you place it on its back on any surface. However, it does protrude quite far, and has a habit of scraping out and collecting bits of fluff from my pocket. Another minor thing on the rear design, at least when it comes to these two finishes, OnePlus's mirror-like reflection near the bottom of the phone has a habit of showing up fingerprint grease really easily. On the front, both of the phones have a flat screen, which I personally prefer because I find it easier to type on, but there is a different approach to the shape and the bezels. Google's gone with a much tighter right-angled corner internally, giving the phone screen a much squarer look compared to the rounder corners of the OnePlus. Those, like the frame shape, make it look and feel more compact. Look at these two phone screens side by side and it can be quite difficult to tell any real significant difference between the two. In fact, they're very similar. Both have the same Full HD Plus resolution after all, and both have AMOLED-based screens. And to our eyes, the peak brightness seems a little brighter on the OnePlus. In fact, overall the screen seems brighter. That helps lift the darker portions or shadows when you're watching video, but in truth, again, there's not a lot in it. How colours look on the displays depends very much on how you set the calibrations. Each has its own option within the menu to adjust the overall appearance, so if you switch them both to vivid or boosted mode, the colours will pop, with OnePlus slightly going a bit more over the top with the oversaturated look. Switch to natural and colours become a little more muted on both phones. In the default modes though, with the Pixel set to adaptive and OnePlus set to vivid, they're very similar. OnePlus has a tendency to slightly over-egg the colours and the contrast, but the OnePlus does have a list of more advanced colour options, allowing you to do more to tune the screen to your preference. The OnePlus screen has a higher maximum refresh rate too, at 120Hz versus 90Hz on the Pixel. But again, telling the difference is really hard with the naked eye. For movie watching and for most games, there's no benefit. It's only really in the user interface or scrolling through the app drawer or settings menu that you might see any difference, and only then if you look very, very closely. Now, because it's such fine margins, the display I don't think is an area where I would base my purchasing decision on. It's not a significant enough factor to make a huge amount of difference in the experience. But the software is. The Pixel 6 comes loaded with the brand new Android 12, complete with theming, whimsical widgets and privacy features. It's quite a big change from the previous software, particularly when you compare it to the Android 11 based software on the OnePlus 9. Although the OnePlus 9 has got Android 12 in beta form if you want to sign up for that, but it doesn't have all of the Android 12 Pixel features. What's more, Pixel 6 will get you 5 years of regular, timely security updates. Now, when it came to performance and speed, we were really interested to see the difference here, if only because Google finally has its own custom processor called Tensor. It offers flagship performance, but can it really compare to the Snapdragon 888? If you benchmark the two, you'll find the Snapdragon-powered OnePlus will score around 800 points higher in the multi-core score, but in general everyday usage, you'll also spot a few minor differences. When it comes to opening apps, both load games quickly, and once loaded, they feel similarly quick. One thing we noticed once games were loaded was that large download files within those games would download quicker on the OnePlus using the same Wi-Fi network as the Pixel. Once within the game, there's a slight feeling that the OnePlus is a bit more responsive to gestures than the Pixel, likely down to the faster refresh rate on the screen. But there's not enough in this, really. What we did notice, however, was the Pixel does tend to get warm down the left-hand side of the phone whenever it's undertaking power-intensive tasks like gaming or using the camera for a while. But it's never so warm that it's uncomfortable. Now, even when it comes to battery life, there's no significant difference between the two phones. Pixel's 4614 mAh capacity is slightly larger than the 4500 on the OnePlus. Depending on usage and what you do with the phones, the battery life will differ, but in experience, I'd say they're very similar. With my own typical usage, which I'd class as moderate with 2 or 3 hours of screen time every day, I'd finish most days with both phones somewhere between 40 or 50%. What does make a difference is charge speeds. Pixel 6 maxes out at 30 watt wired speeds, where the OnePlus has more than double, at 65 watts. It can completely fill the phone from flat in about the same time it takes the Pixel to get to halfway. If that doesn't bother you because you're a nighttime charger, both have similar adaptive charging tech, and that will ensure it charges slowly and is filled up by the time your morning alarm goes off. That way, the battery should keep in good health for a longer period of time. Moving on to cameras, and this is another interesting area of comparison because both have a primary and an ultra-wide lens. For the main, it's 50 megapixels on the Pixel, but 48 on the OnePlus. And the ultra-wide, it's 12 megapixels on the Pixel and 50 on the ultra-wide. But it's not in the pixel count you'll really see the difference when pointing and shooting every day. It's in the image processing. What we found when shooting various images indoors and outdoors using either camera is that we generally preferred the results from the Pixel. Shooting plant life, we found the OnePlus would often boost the colours too much and give them an unnatural look. Pixels was a lot more true to life, especially when looking at the greens and looking at purples on these flowers, for instance. Similarly, we found that in some instances when the HDR kicked in, shooting landscapes or seascapes, the OnePlus had this habit of over-egging the contrast, particularly in the ultra-wide camera. That made colours too dark, and didn't do very well at lifting the shadows or the midtones, unlike Pixel, which seems to deal with any situation pretty well. It was a similar situation when using the two phones' night modes. What we noticed when using them was that the Pixel seemed to automatically leave the shutter open for longer, and of course, its image processing is very advanced, so on the whole, it takes better low-light photos in this mode as well. Again, it lifted the shadows much more to give a better, more balanced look to the photo rather than the OnePlus, which would often have very dark shadows, giving the photos a much more contrasty and crushed look. And in situations like with this shed, for example, there was very little actual light to play with. OnePlus struggled to lift any light at all, and can often be seen applying something of a green tint to everything, while Pixel's defaults to a slightly more warmer tone. Pixel, unsurprisingly, also takes better selfies, whether you're in daylight or nighttime. In the day, OnePlus would often struggle with exposure, but also leave the skin looking a bit too soft. The one thing that OnePlus has got up its sleeve though is macro mode, and that lets you get much closer to small subjects. Now, on the whole, there are two factors here that I think make the biggest difference between choosing one phone or the other, and that's the cameras and the design. If you want the best results from the camera with the least amount of effort, the Pixel is the way to go. It also has a more durable build, and it has Android 12, which I go into more depth on in my Pixel review, but it's delightful. However, the OnePlus 9 has its appeal. It definitely feels more compact and comfortable to use in one hand, and it still has that slightly faster, zippier feel from the higher refresh rate screen, and generally feels a bit faster to complete tasks like downloading large files or faster charging. When it comes to price in the UK at least, there's very little difference, so that's not really something to consider here. Let me know what you think of these two phones in the comments down below. I've been Cam, I'm at Cam Bunton on social media. I'm mostly active on Twitter, so you can get me on there if you want to, or use the comments section down below. If you did like this video, please do leave a thumbs up, it helps us a lot. Subscribe and tap the notification bell, and that way you keep up to date with all of our latest uploads. I'll see you again in the next one. Bye for now.